A millionaire woman willed all her wealth and properties to her stepson instead of her biological son. While you enjoy the story, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment for more interesting stories. Patricia Okafor was 60 years old, but age had not bent her spine nor softened her presence. She lived in Emerald Hills, a place where silence itself smelled of money. Her mansion stood on a wide compound guarded by tall electric fences and security men who spoke only when spoken to. To outsiders, Patricia's life looked perfect. Power, wealth, respect, and a name that opened doors without knocking. But behind the polished marble floors and glass walls was a woman who had fought life with bare hands. Patricia did not inherit wealth. She built it. She started as a young widow with nothing but determination. With a small loan and restless nights, she opened a tiny provision store by the roadside. She woke before dawn and slept after midnight. While others rested, she calculated profits, losses, and risks. Slowly the small shop became two. Two became many. Soon she ventured into importation, then real estate. Years passed, and Patricia became one of the most successful businesswomen in the city. People admired her strength. Some feared her sharp tongue. Many envied her discipline. But Patricia's greatest weakness lived inside her own house. Her only biological son, Johnson. Johnson was born into comfort, something Patricia never knew as a child. From the moment he could walk, he had drivers, toys, and servants. Patricia thought money would protect him from suffering. Instead, it protected him from responsibility. At 28, Johnson had nothing to show for his life. No skill, no business, no ambition. His days began at noon and ended in nightclubs. He drank recklessly, sniffed drugs without shame, flirted with women he barely knew, and spent money as if it were water. Each new trouble was followed by the same words. "Mummy will fix it." And Patricia often did. She bailed him out of police stations more times than she could count. She paid off angry victims, bribed officers, and covered scandals quietly so her name would not be dragged through the mud. Each time she warned him, "Johnson, this life you're living will destroy you." Johnson would nod, pretend to listen, then return to his old ways the next night. Sometimes Patricia sat alone in her large living room, staring at the portraits on the wall, pictures of her achievements, awards, and properties. In those moments, her heart felt heavier than her bank accounts. "What is wealth?" she often asked herself, "if my own son is empty?" The mansion echoed with laughter during parties, but when the guests left, silence reminded Patricia of her failure as a mother. She had conquered markets and competitors, but she could not conquer the stubbornness of her own child. Little did she know that the answer to her pain, her true son by character, had already entered her life years ago, not through birth but through destiny. And the story of inheritance, hatred, and sacrifice was only just beginning. The day Vincent entered Patricia Okafor's life was not a day of celebration. It was a day soaked in pain. Patricia had just returned from a long business trip. Her driver slowed down as they approached a lonely stretch of road on the outskirts of the city. A small crowd had gathered, murmuring in low, frightened voices. A woman lay on the dusty ground, her wrapper soaked with sweat, her breathing shallow and broken. "Stop the car," Patricia ordered. The driver hesitated. "Madam, it may be dangerous." "I said stop." Patricia stepped out, her expensive shoes touching the dust without hesitation. She knelt beside the woman and immediately knew. Death was close. Beside the dying woman stood a thin teenage boy, no more than 16. His clothes were worn, his slippers torn, but his eyes held a depth of fear and love that struck Patricia's heart like lightning. He was crying silently, gripping the woman's hand, whispering prayers he barely understood. "Mama, please don't leave me." Patricia called for help, but it was too late. With her last strength, the woman turned her eyes to Patricia. Her voice came out like a whisper carried by the wind. "Please take care of my son." Then her hand went cold. The boy screamed. Patricia felt something crack inside her. She had seen losses in business, But this loss was raw, human, and unbearable. She held the boy as he cried, his body shaking against hers. That boy was Vincent. After the burial, simple, quiet, and forgotten by the world, Patricia made a decision that surprised even herself. She brought Vincent into her home, not as a servant, not as charity, but as a responsibility she could not abandon. Vincent was confused by luxury. The first night in Patricia's mansion, he couldn't sleep. The bed was too soft, the room too quiet. He missed the sound of his mother's breathing. He cried quietly into his pillow so no one would hear. Patricia watched him closely. She noticed how he greeted the house staff politely, how he said thank you for every meal, how he never asked for more than he was given. When she enrolled him in a good school, he studied like his life depended on it because it did. Vincent never forgot where he came from. He swept floors without complaint. He ran errands willingly. When Patricia asked about school, he answered respectfully. When Johnson insulted him for being poor, Vincent only lowered his head. At night, Vincent prayed silently. God, I lost my mother. Please don't let me lose this one too. Patricia began to notice something strange. Vincent listened. Vincent learned. Vincent cared. When she returned tired from work, Vincent would bring her water without being asked. When she was sick, he sat by her door quietly. He never demanded love, but he gave it freely. Sometimes Patricia would look at him and feel a painful question rise in her heart. How can a child born from nothing carry so much sense, and the one I gave birth to carry none? She pushed the thought away, not knowing that destiny had already chosen its own son for her, not from blood but from loyalty. And slowly, without announcement, Vincent stopped being just an adopted child. He became family. Johnson noticed the change before anyone spoke about it. At first, Vincent was just that poor boy his mother brought home out of pity. Johnson didn't care much. In his mind, Vincent would soon get tired of the big house and disappear like others before him. But Vincent didn't disappear. Instead, he grew. And that was when Johnson's anger began to burn. Vincent woke up early every morning. While Johnson slept with the smell of alcohol and smoke in his room, Vincent was already dressed, making his bed neatly, and preparing for school. He spoke politely to the house staff, thanked the drivers, and respected everyone regardless of their position. Johnson watched all this with quiet irritation. "What are you forming?" he once sneered. "Who are you trying to impress?" Vincent only smiled lightly and kept quiet. Patricia began to notice the difference too, clearly. When Vincent returned from school, he shared what he learned. He asked questions about business, money, and discipline. Sometimes he sat near Patricia's study table, watching her work, absorbing knowledge without being invited. Johnson, on the other hand, only appeared when he needed money. One evening, Patricia sighed deeply after Johnson stormed out of the house demanding cash. She looked at Vincent and said, almost without thinking, "Vincent, you think more like a man than Johnson." The words were simple, but they landed like fire in Johnson's heart. From that day, every compliment Patricia gave Vincent felt like an insult to Johnson. She compared them openly. "Vincent, you're responsible. Vincent, you have sense. Vincent, you respect elders." Johnson clenched his fists each time he heard it. At night, he paced his room, bitterness eating him alive. "Who is this orphan to take my place?" he muttered. "I am her blood." His jealousy soon turned into cruelty. Johnson began to insult Vincent openly. "Hey beggar! Street boy! You eat my food and think you belong here?" Sometimes he ordered Vincent around like a servant. "Wash my car, bring my shoes, clean this mess." When Vincent hesitated, Johnson reminded him cruelly, "You should be grateful we didn't leave you on the roadside." The house staff watched in silence, afraid to interfere. Vincent endured it all quietly. He remembered his mother's last words. He remembered hunger, homelessness, and loss. Compared to that, insults were nothing. When Johnson slapped him one afternoon for walking too slow, Vincent only bowed his head. "I'm sorry," he said. That response confused Johnson, and fueled his rage even more. What kind of person doesn't fight back? Johnson wondered. But Vincent wasn't weak. He was strong in a different way. At night Vincent prayed, "God, help me keep my heart clean. Don't let hatred enter me." Patricia sensed the tension in the house but didn't yet understand how deep it had become. She only knew one thing. Every time she praised Vincent, Johnson grew colder, darker, and more dangerous. And without realizing it, hatred was quietly taking root in Johnson's heart. A seed that would one day grow into violence. Johnson's descent into disgrace did not happen overnight. It was a steady fall, one scandal after another, each worse than the last. First it was just school trouble. Expulsion for fighting. Warnings for drug possession. Patricia paid fines and pleaded with principals, promising that her son would change. She believed a mother's love could still rescue him. But Johnson grew older and bolder. Soon police calls became normal in Patricia's life. Midnight phone calls. Early morning knocks on the gate. Officers standing at her living room, shifting uncomfortably as they explained what Johnson had done this time. One night, he was arrested for beating a man at a nightclub. Another time it was for drug possession. Then came theft, snatching a phone from a woman while high. Each time, Patricia wore dark glasses and went to the station, hiding her swollen eyes and broken pride. She paid bail. She paid compensation. She bribed when necessary. The officers knew her well. "Madam Patricia again." One officer sighed softly. She only nodded, shame burning her chest. When Johnson returned home after each arrest, he showed no remorse. "Mummy, relax. No small thing." Those words cut Patricia deeper than insults. Vincent watched everything quietly. He waited in the car during bail visits. He stood outside offices holding documents. Sometimes he offered to go in alone so Patricia wouldn't have to face the humiliation. At home, when Patricia locked herself in her room to cry, Vincent would sit outside. "Mummy, please eat something." Sometimes she opened the door and collapsed into his arms. "Vincent," she sobbed one night, "why is my own son destroying himself?" Vincent had no answer, only silence and presence. The public began to whisper. Neighbors shook their heads. Society women smiled with fake sympathy. That's the problem with rich children. Money spoiled him. Strong woman but failed mother. At business meetings, some people spoke behind Patricia's back. She's powerful outside, but her house is on fire. The shame became heavier than the scandals. One afternoon, Johnson was arrested again, this time for armed robbery with friends. Patricia arrived at the station trembling. This time the matter was serious. The officer looked at her directly. "Madam, your son is going beyond control. One day, you may not be able to save him." Patricia's knees weakened. She paid again, but something died in her that day. At home that night, she sat alone in the living room, staring into nothing. Vincent knelt before her. "Mummy, please don't blame yourself. You tried." She touched his face gently and whispered the words that broke him. "Vincent, if only you were my real son." Vincent swallowed hard. He wanted to say, "I am here," but he kept quiet. In that silence, Patricia began to understand a painful truth. Blood had given her a son. Character had given her another. And the world was already judging which one truly deserved her name. The sickness did not announce itself loudly at first. It began with small signs. Patricia losing weight, constant fatigue, a dull pain she ignored because she had ignored pain all her life. She blamed stress, business pressure. She swallowed painkillers and kept working. Patricia Okafor had never allowed weakness to interrupt her plans. But the pain grew sharper. Nights became longer. Sleep refused to come. One morning, she collapsed in her bathroom. That was when fear finally forced her to the hospital. The doctors ran tests, long tests, too many tests. When the results came back, the doctor cleared his throat before speaking. "Madam Patricia, it is cancer." The word hit her like a gunshot. For the first time in decades, Patricia felt powerless. She stared at the white wall, her ears ringing. She had faced business rivals, court cases, betrayals, but never death. Not like this. At first she denied it. "No, that is impossible. Run the test again." They ran it again, and again. The result did not change. Patricia flew abroad for treatment. Chemotherapy, radiation, expensive hospitals. Nothing was spared. Money flowed freely, but health refused to be bought. Johnson showed up at the hospital only once, and left after an hour, complaining that hospitals depressed him. Vincent stayed. He slept on chairs. He reminded nurses about medication. He learned how to prepare her meals exactly the way she wanted. When the pain became unbearable and Patricia cried, Vincent held her hand until she slept. Sometimes she woke up at night and found him sitting quietly, reading or praying. "You should go and rest," she said weakly. "I'm fine, Mummy," he replied softly. As Patricia's body weakened, her mind grew clearer. She began to think deeply about life, about death, and about legacy. "What will happen to everything I built?" she asked herself. "What will happen to my name?" The question of inheritance tormented her. She loved Johnson because he was her blood, but she feared him because she knew him. She had seen his recklessness, his crimes, his greed, his disrespect for life. Giving Johnson her wealth felt like pouring petrol on fire. Yet denying him felt like betrayal. Many nights, Patricia cried silently, torn between motherhood and responsibility. One evening, she called Johnson into her room. "My son, come and sit." Johnson sat, restless. "When I am gone," Patricia said slowly, "what will you do with everything I worked for?" Johnson laughed lightly. "Mummy, don't worry. I will enjoy life small." Those words settled her heart like stone. Later that night, Vincent helped her drink her medicine. She looked at him for a long time. "Vincent," she asked gently, "if I leave everything to you, what will you do?" Vincent was shocked. "Mummy, I don't think about such things. I only pray you live." Patricia closed her eyes, tears escaping. That was the moment she knew. The cancer was killing her body, but it was saving her legacy. And the decision she feared for years was finally taking shape in her heart. When word spread that Patricia's condition had worsened, Johnson suddenly remembered he had a mother. The same son who avoided hospitals, who disappeared for days without explanation, now appeared every morning at Patricia's bedside. He dressed neatly, lowered his voice, and mastered the art of fake tears. "Mummy, please forgive me," he said one afternoon, squeezing out a sniff. "I have changed. Swear. If God gives you life, I will make you proud." Patricia watched him closely. She had been a businesswoman all her life. She could read people better than balance sheets. What Johnson showed her was not repentance, but performance. After 10 minutes in her room, Johnson would step outside to answer calls, laughing softly, whispering to women, discussing parties. Nurses noticed it. Vincent noticed it. Vincent never confronted him. Instead, Vincent carried the real burden. He bathed Patricia when she was too weak to stand. He cleaned her vomit during chemotherapy days. He sat beside her through long nights of pain, whispering prayers and encouraging words. When the pain became unbearable and Patricia cried like a child, it was Vincent who held her, not Johnson. Johnson, meanwhile, began to ask questions. "Mummy, have you spoken to the lawyer? Mummy, where did you keep the documents? Mummy, the properties in Lekki, are they in my name?" Each question pierced Patricia's heart like a reminder of failure. One evening, Patricia pretended to sleep. Johnson stepped outside and answered a phone call. "Yes, bro. The woman is fading fast," he laughed. "Once she's gone, life goes sweet. That money no be small." Patricia's eyes opened slowly. Tears rolled down her face, not from pain but from truth. Her son was waiting for her death. That night, after Johnson left, Patricia asked Vincent to help her sit up. Vincent, she whispered, her voice shaking, people can fake love, but loyalty cannot be faked for long. Vincent nodded, confused but attentive. She held his hand tightly. Whatever happens after I'm gone, don't let bitterness destroy you. Vincent felt fear crawl into his chest. Mummy, please don't talk like that. Patricia smiled weakly. Death has taught me many things. As Johnson continued his performance, tears by day, greed by night, Patricia's heart hardened into clarity. She knew now that blood alone did not make a son. Character did. And while Johnson rehearsed lies, Patricia was already preparing the truth that would shake his world. The night Patricia finally made up her mind, rain fell heavily over Emerald Hills. Thunder rolled in the distance as if the sky itself was restless. Patricia lay awake in her bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of rain hitting the windows. Her body was weak, but her mind was sharper than it had been in years. She called for Vincent. Vincent, help me sit up. Vincent hurried in, worry written all over his face. He adjusted her pillows gently, careful not to hurt her fragile body. Mummy, are you in pain? No, she said softly. I just need to do something important. She asked him to step outside for a moment and called her longtime lawyer, a man who had handled her affairs for over 20 years. Her voice was low but firm. I'm ready, she said. Come tomorrow morning. Discreetly. When the lawyer arrived the next day, Patricia dismissed everyone from the room, including Johnson. Johnson protested. Mummy, why should I leave? I'm your son. Patricia looked at him calmly. Yes, that is why you must leave. Only the lawyer remained. With trembling hands but a steady heart, Patricia spoke. I want my entire estate, my company's properties, accounts and shares, to be willed to Vincent. The lawyer paused, surprised. Madam, are you certain? This decision will cause conflict. Patricia nodded slowly. I am certain. Vincent has earned what blood could not guarantee. She explained everything. Johnson's recklessness, Vincent's loyalty, her fear of a destroyed legacy. By the time she finished, tears streamed down her face. The lawyer prepared the documents carefully. Patricia signed with effort, each stroke of the pen draining her strength, but bringing her peace. When it was done, she leaned back, exhausted but relieved. That evening, she asked Vincent to sit beside her. Vincent, she said, holding his hand, promise me something. Yes, Mummy. Whatever Johnson becomes, don't let hatred change who you are. Vincent nodded, tears forming. I promise. She touched his face gently. You came to me as a burden the world rejected, but you became my greatest blessing. Vincent wept quietly, not understanding the full weight of her words. Patricia closed her eyes, finally at peace. The will was written. The decision was sealed. And the fate of two sons, one by blood, one by loyalty, was set in motion. Patricia's final days came quietly, like a candle burning to its end. Her body had become frail, almost weightless, as though life was slowly loosening its grip. Machines beeped softly in her room. The once strong woman who commanded boardrooms could no longer lift a cup of water on her own. Yet even in weakness, Patricia remained dignified. Vincent never left her side. He fed her spoon by spoon, wiped her lips gently, and spoke to her in soft tones. When the pain surged and her face twisted in agony, Vincent held her hand tightly, whispering prayers into her ear. Johnson came occasionally, standing at a distance, checking his phone more than her face. One afternoon, Patricia struggled to breathe. Vincent panicked and called the nurse immediately. Johnson stood frozen, unsure what to do. When the nurse stabilized her, Patricia motioned Vincent closer. Vincent, my son, she whispered. He leaned down, tears already streaming. You came into my life on a day of death, she said slowly, pausing between breaths. But you brought me life. Vincent shook his head, unable to speak. Promise me something, she continued. Stand strong. even when the world turns against you. I will, Mummy, Vincent whispered. That night, rain fell again, soft, steady, sorrowful. Patricia's breathing grew shallow. Vincent sat beside her bed, holding her hand, counting each breath like it was a treasure. Johnson stood near the door, restless. Then it happened. Patricia took one long breath, and did not release it. For a moment the room was silent. Vincent called her name. Once. Mummy, Mummy. No answer. The nurse checked her pulse and slowly shook her head. Vincent let out a cry that shattered the night. He collapsed beside the bed, clutching her lifeless body, shaking, sobbing like a lost child. Johnson stared. No tears fell. After a long silence, Johnson cleared his throat and spoke the words that revealed everything. So, where is the lawyer? The question hung in the air like poison. Vincent lifted his head slowly, disbelief and pain colliding in his chest. In that moment, he understood something terrifying. Patricia's death was not just a loss. It was the beginning of a war. The house of Patricia Okafor was quiet for 7 days. Mourners came and went. Condolence messages poured in from politicians, business leaders, and foreign partners. The mansion that once echoed with authority now carried the heavy silence of death. Vincent moved through the days like a shadow. He wore black clothes, his eyes swollen from crying. He still woke early, still ensured things were in order, still greeted visitors respectfully, because that was who he was. But inside, fear lived in his heart. Patricia was gone, and he believed life would soon turn cruel. Johnson, however, mourned differently. He spoke loudly at the funeral, exaggerating tears. He hugged people dramatically and said things like, "My mother was my everything," while already calculating his future. By the 7th day, the lawyer summoned the family. They gathered in a quiet office. The air was tense. Johnson entered with confidence, adjusting his suit, already imagining keys, bank alerts, and ownership papers. In his mind, the wealth was already his. Vincent entered last, hesitantly. He sat at the far end, hands folded, eyes downcast. He expected nothing. He feared everything. The lawyer cleared his throat. Late Mrs. Patricia Okafor, aged 60, left a legally binding will. He began to read. Johnson leaned back, smiling. Then the words came. She bequeathed her entire estate, companies, real estate, investments, and bank accounts, to her adopted son Vincent Okafor. The room froze. Time stood still. Vincent's heart stopped. "Me," he whispered, barely audible. He looked around, searching faces, thinking it was a mistake. Johnson shot up from his seat. "What nonsense is this?" he shouted. "That is a lie." The lawyer remained calm. "The documents are valid and signed." Johnson's face twisted with rage. "This boy manipulated her. He is a thief. A beggar." Vincent stood slowly, shaking. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." But Johnson was already charging toward him. Chairs fell. Papers scattered. People screamed. Johnson grabbed Vincent by the collar and punched him hard across the face. "You stole my life." Security rushed in and pulled Johnson away as he struggled like a madman. "This is not over," he screamed. "I will kill you, Vincent." Vincent touched his bleeding lip, tears rolling down his face, not from pain but from shock. He had lost a mother, and gained an inheritance that might cost him his life. Johnson's anger did not end in the lawyer's office. It followed him like a shadow, burning, growing, feeding on his wounded pride. As security dragged him outside, he screamed curses, kicking chairs and threatening everyone who crossed his path. "You will regret this," he shouted. "All of you." Vincent remained inside the office, shaking. Blood stained his lips, but the deeper wound was fear. He had never wanted Patricia's wealth, yet now it sat on his shoulders like a dangerous crown. That night, Johnson returned to the mansion drunk and furious. He smashed flower vases. He overturned chairs. He punched walls until his knuckles bled. Vincent locked himself in his room, heart pounding. "You think you've won?" Johnson screamed outside his door. "I will end you. You hear me?" Vincent pressed his back against the door, whispering prayers through tears. The next day, Johnson began to spread lies. He told relatives that Vincent poisoned Patricia's mind. He claimed the will was forged. He accused Vincent of manipulation and witchcraft. Some people believed him because anger is louder than truth. Johnson's violence escalated. He ambushed Vincent in the compound, pushing him to the ground. "You don't deserve to breathe my mother's air," he spat. Vincent refused to fight back. "I don't want trouble, Johnson." That answer drove Johnson mad. "You think acting holy will save you?" One night, Vincent received an anonymous message. "You're walking dead." Fear gripped him. Security around the house was increased, but Johnson had already crossed the line from rage into something darker. Hatred had become intent. And somewhere in Johnson's twisted heart, a deadly decision was forming, one that would destroy what little humanity he had left. Johnson's rage matured into something colder, calculated, silent, and deadly. After days of shouting, threats, and broken objects, he stopped making noise. To outsiders, it looked like he had finally accepted reality. He stopped coming to the house. He stopped calling. He disappeared into the shadows of the city. That silence was the most dangerous thing. Johnson began moving at night, drinking in dark bars where desperate men gathered, men who lived outside the law and feared nothing but hunger. In one of those bars, thick with smoke and cheap alcohol, Johnson found the kind of people he needed. Two men sat with him at a corner table. "You want the job done or you want to scare him?" one of them asked. Johnson's eyes were red, empty, burning with hatred. "I want him dead," he said flatly. No fear. No warning. Dead. They laughed lightly, until Johnson placed a thick envelope of cash on the table. "That's half. The rest comes after." The men exchanged glances and nodded. Johnson leaned forward and hissed. "He returns from inspecting the warehouses every Friday evening. He uses the same road." To Johnson, killing Vincent was not murder. It was justice. In his twisted mind, Vincent had stolen his birthright, his future, his mother's love. What Johnson did not know was that one of the men he hired was already under police surveillance for another crime. Phones were tapped. Movements were tracked. The plan began to unravel before it even began. On Friday evening, Vincent drove home quietly, unaware of the trap forming around him. He was tired, emotionally drained, but still determined to honor Patricia's legacy. As a suspicious car followed him, police vehicles suddenly surrounded the road. Sirens screamed. The criminals panicked and tried to flee, but they were blocked and arrested on the spot. Weapons were recovered. Phones were seized. When the recordings were played back, Johnson's voice was clear. "I want him dead." The next morning, police officers arrived at Johnson's hideout. He was still sleeping when they broke in. "Johnson Okafor, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder." Johnson laughed nervously at first. "You people are joking." But when the handcuffs snapped shut, reality finally punched him harder than any fist ever had. As he was dragged away, neighbors watched. The same neighbors he once bragged to about his future wealth. For the first time in his life, Patricia's money could not save him. And Johnson realized too late that hatred had cost him everything. The courtroom was silent the morning Johnson Okafor was brought in. He no longer looked like the confident, reckless young man who once swaggered through nightclubs. His clothes were plain, his face hollow, his eyes restless. The chains around his wrists clinked softly as he walked, a sound that echoed his fall from privilege to disgrace. Vincent sat quietly at the back of the courtroom. He had not wanted to come. But the lawyer insisted. Justice required presence. Vincent's face was calm, but his heart was heavy. He was not there for revenge. He was there because the truth demanded it. The prosecution presented the evidence one by one. Audio recordings of Johnson planning Vincent's death. Messages promising payment. Weapons recovered from the hired criminals. Witnesses who testified to Johnson's rage and threats. Johnson's lawyer tried to deny everything. My client was emotional. He never meant to kill anyone. But the judge listened carefully. When the recordings played, Johnson's own voice saying, "I want him dead," the courtroom fell into stunned silence. Johnson dropped his head. The judge adjusted his glasses and spoke firmly. "You were born into privilege," he said. "You were given opportunity, protection, and love. Instead of gratitude, you chose greed. Instead of responsibility, you chose crime." He paused. "This court finds you guilty of conspiracy to commit murder." The gavel came down. Johnson was sentenced to a long prison term. As officers dragged him away, he twisted around and saw Vincent for the first time since his arrest. "You think you've won," Johnson spat bitterly. "This is not the end." Vincent stood slowly. Tears filled his eyes, not from fear but from sorrow. "I never wanted this," Vincent said quietly. "You are still my brother." Johnson laughed bitterly as he was pulled away. Outside the courtroom, Vincent walked alone. He visited Patricia's grave that evening. He knelt, placing flowers gently on the earth. "Mummy," he whispered, voice breaking, "I was afraid life would be hard without you. I didn't know you already prepared the way." He wiped his tears and continued, "I will protect what you built. And I will not let hatred destroy me." As Vincent stood and walked away, the sun dipped below the horizon. Justice had been served. A legacy had been secured. And the true meaning of sonship had been written, not in blood but in character.